Hi guys, I'm Nick. I'm the CEO of ILUS International. I'm just going to give a short breakdown of the PR from the end of last week, just to add a bit of meat to the bones. I know sometimes the PRs sort of come across quite sterile, and then it leaves a lot of interpretation open, and then sort of the social media room sort of heat up with all sorts of speculations and XYZ. I'll try to keep this relatively brief. I know you guys need to be trading, making money, not watching someone like me go ramble on in the background. So here we go. I'll just cover one quick question. Quite a few people have been sending mails and questions and things about, are we being affected by this third wave of the virus, the Delta strain, whatever. And a simple answer, no, not really. A couple of little snags here and there, but nothing drama. Certainly we're quite spoiled here in Dubai. They've handled it pretty well, so life is, more or less back as normal. Few restrictions, we've got to wear masks, but we're relatively unaffected on this side. The UK is starting to become more and more free and open as well, so that's also okay. I'll probably say in the last couple of weeks, our only setback on COVID wise is we've been delayed. JP's waiting for his approval from the American Embassy. UK and America have some sort of discussion going on about travel between countries, so we have to get a special exemption for JP to go from the UK and to America and backwards and forwards. So we're just waiting for that to come through, and then he'll be on his way. Unfortunately, it was delayed this week due to man flu. I think the women call it man flu. So yeah, I'll be heading off in the next couple of days. I was a bit nervous to get on an airplane and cough or sniff. I thought I might get arrested in these days and age. So no, we're not affected. Life is going on. Right, to talk about the shareholder structure, the share cap table, SS, OS, whatever you want to call it. We always do, and I think hopefully you guys have either already come to realize, or you're going to come to realize, that we always act on what we believe is the best interest of the shareholders. We're out there to create value. We're not out there to be around for 6 months and bugger off. We've got a mission on hand. You guys all are well aware of what we're trying to achieve. And we face this dilemma, continual dilemma. It's become more so evident in the last, let's say 6 months to a year, maybe 18 months, of the retail investors, the flippers coming in more aggressively in and out. And unfortunately, we can't always focus our business, or we can never focus our business on that sort of investor. We're trying to create a long-term value-added business. People are coming in now and they're going to sit with the business for a while, and they're going to come out the other end hopefully very well off. So when things are moving around on a day-by-day basis, it's not always easy to make decisions knowing that you've got a big pool of investor base that are those short-term retail flippers that want everything to be green every single day, life to be rosy, and be going up 5 or 10% a day. In reality, any sustainable business can't do that. It's just not possible. It's just simply not possible. We're making these long-term decisions, and on that basis, sometimes there are periods of pain. There are periods of things not happening as fast as you would like. Sustainable things take time. They take planning. They take implementation, and to do them properly and build the proper foundations, they've got to be done legally. They've got to be done with the correct paperwork. Otherwise, things come back and bite you in the ass, like they have done in the past. We bought ILUS and we've had all these cockroaches come out the closet. We've now squashed all of those, I think. But we're not about to create a company and leave the doors open for all this mess to come back. We're just not going to play that game. So if the flippers and the short-term investors don't like that and don't have the patience, they want everything to be done overnight, I can't do anything about that. But what I can promise you is we do things properly, we do them right, and we're doing them for the best interest of the shareholders, what we believe in the long term. And I underline that word, medium, long term. So, to talk about the shareholder structure in a little bit more detail, there's a lot of work and a lot of people involved behind all the stuff that we're doing. We're cancelling some shares, we're moving some shares between categories, we are restricting some shares, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff. Things that are, all various different things, from some old deals that were done that should never have been done. I'm moving some of my shares, we're cancelling some shares, some people are retiring some shares. There's a whole lot of things going on, and they all have to be done one by one. You can imagine if we now release a TA update and one transaction's been done. So for example, let's talk through an example. So I'm going to be moving a few 100 million of my shares out of common into a preference category to lock them up further for you guys, give you guys some more confidence that I'm not going anywhere. So imagine I do that on day one, we release the TA report, everybody gets excited. The next day we move something from restricted to unrestricted, everybody then cries. Then the next day we move something from unrestricted back to restricted into a pref. Then everybody gets excited again. And this roller coaster is going to go on for days, maybe a week or a month. And then every day my inbox is going to be filled up with messages about people complaining, and the next day people happy, and the next day saying, what the hell are you guys doing? We can't run a business like that, guys. So the way to do it is to ring fence it, sort it all out, get it into the shape we want, and put out the final structure. Simple as that. You guys, I guess, somehow have to try and trust or believe that we're doing the right thing for the shareholders in the long term. And I guess if you didn't believe that, you probably wouldn't be an investor in ILUS still today. That is sort of the reality of it. So to talk you through a little bit more intricate detail of just one transaction, for example, so you can see what we mean by when we say there's a lot of moving parts. Because I know a lot of the investors and shareholders haven't necessarily ever, run a company or been involved with the details of the back engine of a company. So, for example, just to move my shares from, a few 100 million shares from restricted to a preference category, and bear in mind, I'm willingly doing that. So, and it's only me. So you would think that would be the easiest transaction, right? Just to execute that transaction, I need to have an exchange agreement done up by the company's attorney, because we can't just move them freely. So we have to have an exchange agreement done up by the company's attorney. We're talking about big sums of money in the future. You can't backdate things. So when we go up to a NASDAQ and these shares are worth a hell of a lot of money, we're not going to be able to backdate and say, oh, sorry, we didn't do the paperwork right, a few years ago. It doesn't work like that. We have to get these things done correctly today. So company attorney does the exchange agreement. My personal attorney needs to look over that and make sure he's comfortable with that. My tax advisors need to look at that and be happy with it. The company's CPA needs to be happy with it and make sure that that's all right in terms of the company accounting. Then we have to get that all approved by the TA to make sure the TA is happy and that meets the TA's requirements. Then, after all that's been done, and you can imagine those are all different people, different time zones, some of them in the US, some of them in the UK, some of them in Dubai. Once all those guys are happy that everything's right, then we have to actually issue the company corporate documents, the issuance documents, the resolutions. Then that goes to the TA. Then the TA has to physically actually execute that, and usually he has a couple of last minute questions. So that's just my shares where it's willing, like I'm willingly doing that. So you can imagine where there's somebody that's not willingly, I've convinced him to do it. And of course, he's not going to jump around and he's not going to rush his tax advisors to give him advice, etc., etc. So you can imagine these things just take a bit of time. It's not months and years. We're talking weeks, a few weeks, maybe a month and a bit. Something like that. And just to show you, we're going as fast as we can. It's for the best interest of the investors long term. There's always a give and take in these type of things. It's never just a smooth sailing. So hopefully that kind of gives you guys a little bit more comfort. I know it doesn't answer all the questions. I know that, and you just have to bear with us. But I kind of reinforce that we're doing all these things for the long-term value of the company. And there's one more topic, guys, that sometimes, some of the investors don't necessarily think about. It's not easy running a public company. You can never keep everybody happy all of the time. It's one of those golden rules of life. As long as we're doing the right thing for the right reasons, that is the most important thing to us. And if we wanted to make our lives easy, if I just wanted to wake up in the morning and have a nice peaceful day, I'd let you we'll just reverse split this thing and sort out our share table in a few days. But we know that's not potentially the best thing for the investors. So we rather take the pain. I'd rather have these sleepless nights. I'd rather put up with the abuse from the investor base for a short period of time, a few weeks, like a month, a bit, whatever, to get this done in a way that we believe is the best value for the shareholders. There's the continual, discussion about reverse splits. Are we going to reverse split? Are they doing this? They're trying to do this. They're not releasing the TA report because of X, Y, and Z. Guys, if we weren't acting in what we believe is the best interest of the shareholder, we would just reverse split it, and we would have done it a long time ago. So, hopefully you guys can, consider that in your perception of what you think we're up to. We are trying to do the best thing for the shareholders in the long term, and hopefully you take some comfort in that. There's been a bit of speculation going around in some of the groups and whatever that we are doing a spin-off. At this time, I can't deny or confirm whether that is the case or not. I've also seen a few comments, that these spin-offs are bad ideas and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to comment in the terms of an ILUS potential split off or not, but I'm just generally going to talk about split offs in general for those that may not be familiar with how it works. There's various different versions of a company born, giving birth to another company, if you want to call it that. There's split offs and spin outs and all sorts of different variants of it, and they're all different and all have their own different characteristics. The one that everyone seems to be talking about is a spin off. Spin offs historically are highly successful and add significant shareholder value. And there are very, very, very few cases where that isn't the case. But they're only successful if they're done with the correct and proper planning. In other words, you can't spin off a good company into another company for the sake of, let's say clearing up a share structure or something. And you just move everything that's good into a new company and you leave everything that's bad and shit, and excuse my language, but into the old company. Because inevitably what happens then is that does not add shareholder value. Because what then ends up happening is the good stuff moves into a nice clean company. That clean company goes off. Yes, the shareholders now have that benefit that they're now in that company. But inevitably the parent dies because the parent is left with all the baggage and all the nonsense. And typically no good business. Someone spoke to me the other day about it, and I kind of described it as like, in a beehive situation. You couldn't take the honey and the bees out of the hive and expect the hive to survive. It just doesn't work like that. So typically how a successful spin-off is done is when a division or a part of a company that's highly successful, or not even highly successful, but has the potential to be highly successful, but needs its own focus, it needs its own drive, and it has its own particular strategy in mind that it cannot achieve within the parent organization. And the parent structure wants to create value for the shareholders by freeing that entity to allow it to achieve what it needs to achieve, and giving the company the opportunity to raise the capital and to move on and basically tick the boxes. So the shareholders on that basis, get their stake in a new spin-off company, and that company can fly and it can achieve everything it needs to achieve very quickly. But simultaneously, what's left in the parent company has to be developed. You can't take out all the good stuff out of the parent company, otherwise it dies. And then naturally what happens is the shareholders in the parent company sell off as fast as they can because they know inevitably it's going to die. Well, that's not a successful model. I mean, I certainly wouldn't put my name on anything like that. There's no way we would even entertain anything like that if we couldn't get a value out of it, if we were going to do something along those lines. The parent company, typically, if the parent company was left with still good assets and it had good ideas or good strategy to bring in new assets that are going to complement the business, and typically there may be other assets in that business that also have the same potential, that they can't meet potential of themselves inside the parent organization while the other part of the business is inside there, because they have a conflicting pull and the resources getting spent on one of the entities, not on the other. So a spin-off is usually highly successful and creates a lot of value if it's done properly with proper management, proper structure. I would just highly recommend, or request, suggest, whatever, if that's the speculation going there, people do their proper research. Don't just look back to one or two deals. 4 or 5, maybe 10 people have sent me over the last 48, 36 hours, whatever, of some OTC deal that happened last week or in the last month that went wrong. I haven't looked into it. I'm not going to comment on it. I don't know. They had a 9 billion share structure or something. I really have no idea what they did. I'm not even going to comment on it. I'm just saying look beyond a deal that you might have stumbled across, and look at the stats, because typically they're highly successful. I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but I'm just saying, please look at a bigger picture, if that was the case. So someone asked me, actually yesterday, if ILUS was going to do a spin-off, how might it look? What would you be thinking? It's a tricky question to answer, because I'm not saying we are doing a spin-off or we're not doing a spin-off. But if you look at inside the ILUS business, we've got a complex lot of business in there, which a lot of people aren't actually familiar with the whole ins and outs of it. We're looking very forward to the shareholder meeting, which we're just sort of trying to get to the point of finalizing dates, but we needed a few sort of real concrete pegs in the ground, if we want to say that, to finalize before we actually call the date, because the shareholder meeting will actually be very important. We're not going to a shareholder meeting just to listen to a whole bunch of grumbling and a whole bunch of happy shareholders and kind of have this, hot air of a day. That's not what we're intending to do. We're intending to have our shareholder meeting and concisely pitch what we're planning to do over the next 24, 36 months of the entire business. And there's a lot to it. And if when we pitch that, each idea and each concept needs to be well thought out, well spoken out, and we need to know exactly what we're trying to do with each one and how we're going to achieve it. And especially looking back over the last 6 months, how the shareholders expect everything to be done overnight. It's important that when we pitch that, we also know the rough timelines of how things are going to play out and when they're going to play out, and ultimately who's going to be responsible. I think people still, don't necessarily. This is a global phenomenon. People don't really they underestimate the people behind a business. Every product has multiple people, has specialists. People just look at our nozzle, for example. It's not just a nozzle. In our system, we would have a specialist who's an expert in the supply system, which would be tanks or cylinders. You then have a specialist who's in the nozzle and in the distribution, which is the flow dynamics. And then you'd have a third specialist who's the overall whole mechanical. And then within that, you've got design and mechanical. So you've got people that sit behind a computer and do designs, and then you've got hands-on engineers. So there's a lot of people behind any sort of moving part. So in the business, we need to always bear that in mind. There's no point in us pitching to you, this is what we're planning to do. But there's sort of no substance behind it. Otherwise, it never happens and it never materializes. So, we're planning to come back to that point. We're planning to have, look at the shareholder meeting at some point in the fall. It might fall into as late as the early part of winter, but we're certainly hoping to try and do that in the fall. But we're also hoping to do that meeting in the US, where we can actually have some of our equipment in there out of our new factory, where we can actually do some demonstration days. We can actually have a bit of a day out and show people how it's working. We're going to potentially partner with one of the fire services there, where they can actually bring a truck and people can spray the nozzle. We're kind of planning to make it a bit more interactive. I think guys have probably worked out that's how we like to run our business. Coming back to the point about if ILUS was to do a potential spin out, how would it look? What would we do? Without sort of saying much about it, so we haven't confirmed whether we are or aren't doing it, or just trying to explain the scenario. Within our business, we've got an emergency response division, which is obviously the current firebug technology, if you want to say, as you guys know it now, which really is the Mismax, the nozzle, the floating pumps, the alpha pumps, the mongoose. We've got a whole range which is around emergency services. And those type of products are really geared at a certain type of customer. They have a certain sales cycle, they have a certain sales channel, they have distribution models, they have a certain way of working. And then within the same technology that we have the fixed systems. And the fixed system, which obviously is still in its infancy, infancy in terms of commercialization. The technology and products are not in the infancy. We've been working on them for a long, long, long time. They were just put on a back burner as a second priority until we got the emergency services business developed. So even if you look back on some of our literature and things that are around, there's an emergency response products logo that's popped up a few times. You may have seen it. That's been around for sort of the last 2, 3, 4 years, because that's always been the eventual milestone that all those response vehicle products, all the emergency response, the fire and rescue products, the life-saving appliances, or portable devices, if you want to call them that, would be put into that subsidiary within the ILUS company. So that logo is not even new. You've probably seen it around in some of our stuff in the past. But the fixed system products is a whole different kettle of fish. Same technology, and up until this point, it's been the same people. The same engineers we've been using on both sides of the table. However, as that emergency response business now grows globally, those staff sort of start to really get sucked into a lot more detailed work, and their team sort of starts to grow, and they don't have the time to spare putting into the fixed response, into the fixed suppression business, which has an entire different skill set. Although the technology and the discharge is the same, and you guys look at it and say, well, the mist coming out is the same and it does the same thing, it's totally not the same behind the scenes. The designer part, the approval part, the certification, the installation, it's much more project orientated, it's on-site work. It's working through a different sales channel, it's working with integrators, it's working with facilities management companies, and ultimately it's humongous business. The fixed systems, the fire suppression business is huge. It's every building in the world, potentially. So, that sort of, just to encapsulate that, if we were looking at that, that's something that we'd have to consider. That, we've got an emergency service response business that's now grown up. It's gone from being in nappies crawling on the floor, and it's about to stand onto its feet. And we've now got a fire suppression business coming along that's still in nappies. In fact, it's probably worse than in nappies. It's probably still breastfeeding. It's a real baby at the moment, but it'll grow up much quicker because now the company's got capital, it's got structure, it's got people, it's got resources, it's got infrastructure, etc. And we've been burning the candle on those things for a long time, developing product behind the scenes. And now that's ready to come to light. It's ready to start taking the certification, the commercial kitchen system. And while I'm talking on that topic, we've just employed a product specialist. He's got a significant amount of experience developing fixed systems, and particularly around the certification. He's certified more products than I can count to in fixed systems globally. Europe, America, US, various different other parts of the world, sort of Russia, etc. So we think he's going to speed up our process a lot and add a lot of value. So and then let's not even now just to come back to the ILUS companies within the company. We've now got that same technology that we could use on dust suppression. Dust suppression is as big again. It's probably not something you guys maybe not necessarily familiar with, but it's becoming more and more of an issue around the world globally. So if you have let's say a construction site, a factory, a food processing plant, I don't know, a power station, whatever, where a lot of dust is produced. So let's say, for example, sugar or flour, something like that, where they're loading this flour or this material on and off of devices, whether it's going off a conveyor belt, down a chute onto a truck, there's loads of dust created. It might be coming off a ship, getting pumped off a ship onto a conveyor belt, going from a conveyor belt into a machine to be processed, whatever it might be. At that process, when it's producing that dust is explosive, it's damaging to equipment, it's damaging to humans, it shortens the maintenance of the machinery and the equipment, but ultimately it creates a fire risk and an explosion risk. And dust is now becoming more and more of an issue globally. It's more spoken of, there's more and more regulations coming in, there's more science behind the measuring of how do they measure dust, is it still dust, is it moving dust, is it settling dust, whatever. And there's more regulations coming into people dealing with dust suppression. And in a way, it sort of mirrors the fire suppression type of stuff, in that on dust suppression, people just add chemical, because the easiest way they can deal with it is by spraying out a chemical that effectively bonds the dust together and creates like a thick, heavy substance that will sink to the floor or sit on the floor. And the same, occurs, let's say, in a mine, an open cast mine or even an underground mine, where they've got trucks and vehicles moving it up and down. It's creating a significant amount of dust. And usually what they do is they drive a big truck, literally a big sprayer, spraying water out the back, and usually they add some type of molasses or some type of chemical out of the back of the truck that creates a crust on the road. Anyway, these type of things are costly, they're not sustainable, a lot of them are not environmentally friendly, there's logistics of moving A to B. Our technology does the same thing. And actually we developed a way in the past of actually electrocharging the droplets, which creates more of a bonding. Now, we're not in that space yet. We've played around with it. We installed some, very, very rudimentary amateur, trial models, if you want to call it. I wouldn't even call them as like proper installations. But they're really us just playing with, does our technology actually work in that space? And the answer is yes. And again, mist is becoming more and more common in that space, especially our supersonic range of products, which doubles up with the fixed suppressions and into a dust suppression. So right now, it's not on our radar, it's not on our agenda, but it is on our product list for the future at some point. Whether it's a couple of years out or 3 or 4 years out, we're not exactly sure yet. Again, it very much depends on the company structure, it very much depends on the company's financing ability, it equally depends on the people. It's as we can attract good people to deliver these projects and deliver the products. So that could potentially be another whole product on its own, but born out of the same technology. And you can imagine that business model would not work with the fire suppression system or the emergency response department. They're completely different way to market, different route to market, different design, different certification. The only thing that fundamentally is the same is the heart of the product, the actual technology. So that would be something to consider. And last but not least, just in the current range of let's say business units that we would have, is our eRaptor. So we've intentionally gone a little bit quiet on that over the last, month or 2 months, because we're working extremely hard at it behind the scenes, and we don't want to be pressurized with people pushing us to release. We learned our lesson on the kitchen system. We probably told people about it a little bit too early, but we are about to hire 2 specialist EV engineers. One of them's been working for Daimler Chrysler, and he's actually worked on an electric fire truck for a major manufacturer in Europe. So he's about to join us. And then one of the other EVs is a specialist in battery technology. So we're kind of wanting to bring our eRaptor rapidly to market, particularly in line with the US market. hence the new government's protocols there, the way America's wanting to work. And that's very much born into our idea, or let's say embedded into our idea of our factory in the US, and our distribution model in the US. Now, the E-Raptor on its own has a whole lot of different potential. There's one that we developed it originally for our fire demands, as a small response vehicle, small fire vehicle, small emergency vehicle, small ambulance, whatever. But that product, when we can get it good enough with certification with these new experts, has the potential to directly take on the Polaris 6x6. There's no electric, EV on that space at the moment. The technology we've gotten developed so far is very, very, very good, but it was developed for what we needed it for. And it's not going to take a lot to get it to where we need it to be a commercially viable product through a small vehicle UV applicator, application. I.e. that vehicle could, in the US, that the E-Raptor could potentially be in every Polaris or every John Deere distributor in the whole of the US. And there's thousands of them, literally thousands of them. Eventually those farmers, whether it's schools, whatever ports, whatever the application of those vehicles are, holiday resorts, whatever, eventually they're going to get moved onto electric. It's inevitable. Whether it's in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, it's inevitably going to happen. And at the moment, there's no one in that space with electric UVs. I think there's a couple of four-wheel ones that I've come across, very, very recently, but whatever. The point being that product has its own baby again. Now, if you look at that as a bigger picture, as a product selling that, then it's almost in the automation space. So now, automobile space, if we're now selling, a UTV, a specialist EV UTV, sold through vehicle distributors, how does that fit with fire suppression, and how does that fit with emergency response vehicles? Which division would that business fit in? So, that's not saying it couldn't sit within the ILUS group, and it's not saying they all couldn't sit within the ILUS group. If you look at the large conglomerates of the past, the Tycos, the UTC, United Technologies Corporations, the GE, GE, General Electric. If you look at these big, conglomerates, they've always grown up and always been born with multiple different divisions, and they've acquired, and as they've acquired, they've split up this and this and this. And, so if we look at TVC, for example, we acquired the TVC company. 60-70% of the TVC company is what we really want, that fits within the Firebug product range, of the emergency vehicles and rapid response vehicles and small military vehicles. The other, say 30-40% of the TVC or TVC products is food trucks and mobile vehicle conversions, industrial mobile vehicle. That doesn't fit with fire. We don't want to go to a NASDAQ making food trucks. So at some point we have to spin out that food truck business and offload it. So I'm just trying to give guys, give everyone kind of a bigger picture of this whole spin out scenario. If there was ever to be a spin out within ILUS, this is it wouldn't necessarily be just because we want to move out into a new share structure so we can move faster. There's a lot that goes on behind our business, and I'm well appreciative and in a way a little apologetic that we haven't spun out our whole business model to you guys in much more detail. It sort of feels like we've been public and had a relationship with you shareholders forever, but we haven't. Realistically, we're 7 months in. In fact, we're not even 7. We started in the end of January. So we're sort of 5 or 6 months in a relationship with you guys as our shareholders, and in an overall business as ILUS. So I think we've come a long way in a very short period of time, and we're going to go a hell of a long way in the next short period of time. But I reinforce again the back part that I've mentioned 100 times in all our correspondence, that we're looking to the medium long term, and everything we're doing is strategically planned to execute a long-term plan, and that long-term plan will bring shareholder value. I'm relatively confident in it. That's my drive on a daily basis, because don't forget, I'm also a shareholder. So it's in everybody's interest to do that. So yes, on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Tuesday or whatever, in the coming weeks, past weeks, we're going to have red days. We're going to have some heat. We're going to have people grumbling. It's inevitable. It's life. There's nothing we can do about that. But we're not looking at last Thursday or next Tuesday. We're looking at Tuesday, 2024. That's where we're looking to. That's where we're trying to get to. And we know the milestones we've got to go through. We're well aware of the pain that we've got to go through to go that way. And I actually tried to find this picture that was sent to me a little while ago, to actually share it on our Twitter, but I couldn't find it. Of a business plan going from A to B. In the ideal world, and in a shareholder's point of view, you have a business plan. You're going to go from A to B, and that's your route. Your path is straight line. In reality, you go A to B, but actually your route is like this: backwards, upside down, around, and then you end up at B. The point is, as long as you get to B, Now, we're trying to avoid as much of this backwards and forwards and upside down. We're trying to make sure that our planning and our execution is as straightforward and as simple and as risk-free as possible. The world is changing at a phenomenal speed at the moment. And there's all these different things coming in, hybrid vehicles, EVs, crypto, you name it. These things coming at us furious and fast at the moment. So we need to try and be as light on our feet and as risk focused as possible. We want to make sure that we're not going to get caught with our pants down because of any change of regulation, the new thing that comes out hotter than the old thing. So we need to make sure that we structure it accordingly. So hopefully, you guys are shareholders and investors, you'll understand that, you'll bear with us, you'll be patient, and you'll buy into, sort of what we're trying to do. And certainly when we do, the shareholder meeting, I think a lot of it will become a lot clearer. And when we pitch each one of these sort of units to you, I think you'll sort of start to see the really underlying value of what we really have in our back pocket. And it's not in our back pocket, it's in your back pocket. So, we've just got to be able to turn that from business that we've got now into hard dollars that can sit in your bank account. And we're on it, and we're going as fast as we can. So I want to talk a little bit about the USA strategy, which unfortunately I said we lost a little bit of a week, but 1 week's not a big drama. So I'll be heading off in the next few days. I'm actually heading off via Europe. We're trying to get that just nudged a little bit along. We're really close now to getting that sorted out and wrapped up. But on the way to the US, our plan, I think we've published probably enough about it at this point. We've got these 2 acquisitions that we've signed letters of intent for, and those, we're working through the due diligence. We wouldn't have signed the letters of intent had the due diligence not have stood up to our first couple of levels of due diligence. We're now into sort of the final nitty-gritty, the strategic planning, the rollout planning. Because once you put a pen on a dotted line and you transfer cash and shares and whatever you're doing, your clock starts ticking immediately. The very next day you start getting calls from the old management saying, okay, what are we doing? What do we need to do, boss? We've got a problem with this product's broken, we've got to worry, how do we deal with these things? So it's not just about acquiring a business and moving on. We actually need to have the plan. So all that's been planned and organized, and sort of well down the lines on that. So that's underway part of our creates some of the backbone of our US strategy. Both of those businesses are within the fire and rescue emergency response business. So that's clear. The Ocala factory, we've shortlisted a few properties, which we'll be going to finalize which one we're going to go for and signing the lease on that. We've been doing Zoom interviews over the last almost a month for different staff for the factory. All the different skills that we need. Obviously there's accounting, there's sales, there's engineering, there's manufacturing, there's quality, there's compliance. There's the whole bunch of skills that we've needed. And I think I said a little bit earlier in this snippet that the people are really important. We can have the best product in the world, but if we don't have the best people and we don't have the best support and the best shareholders behind us, you never get over the finish line. So that's where we are at the moment. Now the initial plan for the factory in Ocala in particular is, firstly, over the first 6 months, while everything's getting set up, is to start doing light assembly of components which come from our Dubai or our UK facility. So it'll be just final components, final assembly, knocking stuff together, and then starting to distribute that out. So we're hoping that some of that will be distributed through one of the acquisitions. And then over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, we'll be looking to set up a small distribution on the East Coast and a West Coast, and probably something up, Chicago sort of way into sort of that industrial zone, to give us a complete coverage. And that whole distribution model is really important for the completed products. And then over the first 6 months is assembly, and the next following period will be actually starting to physically manufacture those from scratch. And we hope part of the second business that we're acquiring, some of those components will be able to be manufactured in their existing infrastructure, which means we won't need to invest in that in Ocala. They already have an infrastructure which is already producing some similar components and some similar pumps and motors and firefighting engine, not fire trucks, but firefighting pumps and firefighting systems. So we're hoping that will be able to speed up our overall manufacturing. And Ocala, I think we published previously that Ocala really was identified because there's three companies. I think 2 of them are public in our space, and our space is quite unique and it's quite specialist. It's not easy to find the right skills. It's very easy to find a flow dynamic engineer or a hydraulic engineer or electric engineer or whatever, or even somebody with vehicle experience, for example. But to find the people that actually have worked within the fire and emergency response vehicle sector is a whole different kettle of fish. And obviously, our stuff is so specialist. So never mind our technology, putting together a whole system, you really have to understand the operation of how a fire brigade works or an emergency response team works. Even down to little things like how would they physically turn on a pump? Well, a firefighter's got big, thick gloves on. So the switches and all the gauges and everything you need to have that into consideration. You can't put LED screens if he's trying to touch it with firefighters' gloves. There's all these different things to go, and unless you've actually got hands-on experience in that space, you don't always come out with the best product, the quickest. It takes you a while, and then you supply it to customers and they complain, and then you have to modify, and it takes you 3, 4, 5, 10 attempts before you finally perfect your product. So we think moving to a Ocala close to those other factories, we're inevitably going to find some skills in that space that have come from the industry and come from the sector, and 2 of those 3 businesses are substantially large. They're global players, and they're in our spaces and they make fire trucks or fire emergency response. But bear in mind, we are specialists. We're really in the rapid response vehicles. We're in the mist. Neither of those have mist. They don't know anything about water mist. That's not their space. They're into building big industrial, conventional, normal fire trucks that they've been making for the last 50, 100 years. But the overall skills on design of those pumps and that type of stuff is what we're really after. So we're pretty sure that that's the right place to be, although it may not be an industrial mecca. It's not a sort of industrial capital of America. We're pretty sure that inevitably there's going to be supply chains in place there as well, which will also be beneficial to us. So we're cracking on with that plan as quick as fast as we can, and hopefully the whole lot, in the very short term, will dovetail the 2 first acquisitions as well as the Ocala factory, and then gradually, so that whole baby will grow up, and slowly our distribution through the whole US will start to kick in. Now, we also mentioned in the PR about the OEM partnerships. So we've got a number of OEM partnerships under discussion, and actually 2 or 3 of them are not new. They're people that we've known I've known probably for 10 years, known the CEOs of those companies maybe 5, 10 years. JP certainly got relationships with a couple of them as well, that he's had relationships with for 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. But it's not always easy. Our business, because it's quite disruptive, just like if you look at Apple, for example, they open their own Apple stores because they want their product sold in a certain way. They want to demonstrate in a certain way. They know their product is premium priced. So in order to get that premium price, they need to present it in a certain way to the customer. And if you sell something through a conventional sales model, you don't always get that. So I'll use one example. So one of the biggest distributors in the US are firefighting equipment. They've got branches everywhere, distribution centers everywhere, and they've told us they're happy to distribute our product. They'll put it on their shelf in all their distribution centers. They'll hold the product on stock. Their sales guys will take the inquiries to the quotations and deliver. No issue, happy. And they'll do the warranty support behind the scenes. So naturally you would think, great, that's your immediate route to America. So immediately we're going to have volume. When you actually dig down now and actually look at the practicalities of what does that really mean, it means you put the product on the shelf. But where do the sales come from? The American market don't know about our product yet. The fire chiefs in those markets don't know about our product. So our nozzle or our pump goes in a catalog, and in the catalog there's 10,000 products they're distributing. I don't know if there's 10,000, but I'm making an example, you know what I mean. So they have a fat catalog, and there's everything from firefighting gloves, suits, helmets, you name it in this catalog. And our product is 1 nozzle of 50 nozzles that they sell. And our pump is 1 nozzle of 100 pumps that they sell. But our nozzle and our pump is not the same specs as everyone else, so it doesn't even get a look in. When a fire chief in New York or whatever picks up the catalogs, he needs a pump, he needs 400 gallons a minute, he scrolls to the catalog page, he chooses one that's got 400 gallons. It's not ours, because that's not our spec. We can do the same thing way better than that with 20 gallons, but that's not our thing. So we don't get a look in. So unless the sales guys are actually out presenting, doing the hard yards, doing the demonstrations, we're at the exhibitions, doing that stuff, you're never going to get the sale. So all you've done is now signed away your rights to a big market. Our biggest market will be, signed away the rights, put stock on the shelf, and you're getting no return from it, which is not a great idea for you guys, because ultimately you guys, in essence, are funding the stock, the inventory, and we get nowhere. And then our product and our business is a flop. So we really need to get in front of the customers. We need to do demonstrations. We need to do roadshows. We need to do open events. We need to do demonstration models with the customers where we actually give them stuff and we go back and check with them a few weeks later. We actually need to work hard behind the scenes for this first 24 months, 18, 24, maybe even 36 months while the product is being disruptive. Until you get to a point where the brand name is known and customers actually start to ask for that, and it actually starts to get written into their tender specifications. Until that point, we have to do the hard yards. So why are you going to sign up a distributor? He's going to take the lion's share of the margin and we're doing the dog work. To us, that doesn't always make sense. It would never make sense. But ultimately, we still want their distribution channels because we can't distribute nationwide at the drop of a hat. So really, it's about getting the most of those distribution channels and their brand and their penetration and their ability to execute in the market far quicker than we ever can. But it's not about giving up our margin and not about giving up our rights and our potential in that market. 24, 36 months down the line, we'll probably be in a different situation. We're going to be saying, let's far rather let them do the donkey work, because the quotations and the requests and the inquiries just come through on a daily basis anyway, because people are now asking for the product. The product is now specified, the brand is now known, etc. But we're not there yet. So we also had a question a little while ago, why haven't we partnered with Rosenbauer? I don't know, you guys may have Googled, or I don't know when you've done your research, in your DD packs. Rosenbauer is probably the biggest, second biggest, certainly third biggest in fire equipment manufacturer globally. They're in Austria. We actually know them very well, very, very well. JP's been to their site, 3, 4, 5 times. We've been toying with the idea of doing a partnership with them. They're very, very keen to partner with some of our technology. But we're back to the same point that I was just discussing. Do you want to give away those rights, very early on while the product's still in its infancy? And there's probably a reason why Apple didn't just partner with any other electronics distribution company and say, there we go, you can put our mobile phones on your shelf. You can just sell them in a Walmart. There's a reason why they kind of have their own stores and their own routes to market. I think the answer really longer term is very much a bit of both. You have your own business development team that are creating the demand, and that demand is getting filled through a distributor. But in the early days, the margin is key, because margin, and the margin is what generates the cash flow. But we also need the volume in order for that to make sense. So these are some of the daily challenges that that we have strategically, and we're sort of working through that process. So we've got some meetings with some OEMs, and we're hoping we're going to sort of get some of those bolted down. But they're friendly OEM agreements. They're not necessarily the biggest ones in the country, but they're ones that we feel are going to add value to us, and we're going to be able to add value to them. And then gradually, as we grow step by step, we will see how things unfold, and certainly the different territories. And, we're not claiming to be experts in the American market. We're experts in our field, but we're not necessarily experts in the American market. So we may find that what works on the East Coast doesn't necessarily work on the West Coast. We might find what works in the industrial fire brigades doesn't work with the volunteers. Wildfire may not be the same as the government municipality fire brigade. So, we're very much in this next, say, 6 to 12 months of learning, but not wasting money, and learning conservatively, but aggressively at the same time. And we believe we've got the right strategy. Slowly, step by step, but getting this initial manufacturing and infrastructure in place first is probably the most important thing, because otherwise we're not going to be able to actually supply any of that demand, and we won't have the ability or the resource or the infrastructure to be able to go out and do the demonstrations and the support. And customers are going to want to come and see where the product's made. They want to see how it works. They're going to ask for their variations. Could you put it on a hose this big or that long or whatever? Part of this next American trip that I'm doing now and JP's doing now is the Ocala factory, trying to get these 2 acquisitions over the finish line. And then starting to get these OEM partnerships into the right sort of shape. So hopefully that sort of from the PR will answer some of the thoughts and questions about the US. And again, all of this at this stage is around the emergency services products. So there we go. So guys, I think that probably wraps up, the PR from the end of last week. And I thank you for your patience and your support. And I know it's a frustrating period for some of you who may be in at a higher price, not expecting to be stuck in for so long. And hopefully the ones that are in, with a long-term view are, relatively comfortable with where they've been and sort of like the noises that keep coming out and sort of what we're trying to do. And I'm well aware and appreciative that, you guys need to see the results, coming back on the PR side overall. This PR topic in general is, a little bit of a hot egg, hot potato, if you want to say, that if we don't put out PRs, then everybody complains. We can't put out PRs legally and fiduciary. We're not allowed to put out, PRs that are not concrete. So we cannot say we've acquired someone if we haven't. Even if it is already, we've shaken hands and cheers the glass of champagne over it. If we physically haven't transferred funds and the pen is not signed, the contract is not signed, we can't announce these things. As much as we would like to, we know it's happening, but we can't announce these things formally in a PR until that's happened. And on the other hand, if we don't put out to say that it's happened, then obviously everybody gets upset. So it's important that we keep you updated, and we know then that leads to some shareholders complaining, saying, well, why are you putting out fluffy PRs with no proper information and blah, blah, blah. It's all talk. So we're in that fine line of, please some, don't please the others. The point is, we believe, and we do the right thing for the right reasons, we believe. We put out the updates, and we keep you guys updated in the loop of what's going on. And as things start to become concrete, we put out the formal PRs. And we're very well aware that, as I said, you guys want to see results. I want to see results. The whole management team want to see results. The staff within the management teams want to see results. They're busting a gut day and night. So there's nothing more pleasurable for them than actually seeing a score on the board for the hard work and sweat that they've put in. But we all appreciate it. We know how these things go. We know how long they take. We know what we're trying to do. And I think we all, including me, we all forget that we're only 6 or 7 months down the line in this ILUS venture. And again, we say we've achieved a lot. So we are achieving a lot, and we have actually shown a lot of results so far. Bear in mind it's 6 months, 7 months. So you can expect to see more results, and very much we would hope that sort of as this year goes on, and certainly into 2022, that almost every PR is totally results based. We have achieved X, Y, and Z. We have achieved ABC. And you guys will look at those PRs and go, oh, that's right. They told us about that in April last year. Oh, guys, do you remember seeing that PR in June last year? Now it's come right. So, and I know it's a big trust for you guys to look back and say, well, yes, they're saying it, and will they do it? That's a decision you guys need to make, not us. That's something that I guess you guys will need to build a confidence in our management, myself and our management, and particularly in JP as well, who's very much on the front line. And on that basis, we can only ask for your trust and support and patience along those lines. And can assure you we're working day and night to make sure these things are executed, and we very much want to be announcing PRs that are results driven. We've just landed this big contract, we've just signed this OEM contract, we've just done X, Y, and Z. So let's watch the space and see how things progress over the next 6 months to a year as these things start to land and we start to put scores on the board. Now I just want to wrap up this PR. And thank you for taking the time out. I know you guys are all busy. I didn't intend it to be so long. I guess I hadn't thought through sort of how detailed some of these topics are to explain in a proper way. And I don't want to keep them sort of very high level because it defeats the object. The idea is to give you guys the information. So thank you very much for your support. I'll be around the US from later part of this week, or certainly into the early part of next week. And I'll be catching up with some different things. We'll put out some news and stuff from when we're in places that we have time to catch up with people. We're available, and let's see how things roll out over the next little while. So wishing you guys all the best, and thank you for your support and patience with us.